This is an assembly video for the 3D Potterbot 7. This video can also help you assemble our other models, the Mini, the Micro, the 7 Pro, the 7 Super, the XL, and the XXL as well. Here in the box, it just has a packing list with your invoice as well as a manual. The bat and backplate are here on top, and we're going to take out all the other parts and make sure we have everything in the box ready to be assembled. Here we've taken out the parts box, the power supply, the black ABS cover, the gray PLA covers. We have a extra tube with the anti-rotator inside of it, which we should take all of the foam off of it. The USB cable as well, which can be used to change the configuration file for other settings, such as making a larger print. And we also have the X-rail and the screen are all together in one piece. So we're going to take those out. And then all that's left in the box is the main printer and the extruder itself. As we ship them, the extruder should be kind of clamped in there. So you can just unhook it or unclamp it and get it out of the box. And then we can go ahead and take the main printer body out of the box as well. We recommend saving the box and extra foam in case you ever need to send a part back or send a printer back for repairs or maintenance. Now we're going to start the actual assembly of the machine. The parts box has parts that will be required to assemble the machine, such as the Allen keys and the grease tube. You don't have to use the Allen keys we provide. You can use a metric set of bits on a drill, which can speed up the process. But the machine can be fully assembled with all the parts we send with it. The SD card is included in the parts box, but you need to insert it into the touchscreen on the side, as shown here. We're going to start the assembly of the machine by installing the backplate on the back. All of the screws used for the assembly of the machine are already in the spot they belong and need to be unscrewed, the part put on, and then the screws put back into the position they were in. It's important to not tighten the screws all in a clockwise or clockwise pattern. You should do crisscrossing patterns in the corners first, rather than tightening one down all the way, then tightening the second one. You should do them across from each other. The next part of the machine we're going to assemble is the X-rail and the screen. Just like the backplate, the screws for the X-rail to attach to the Y-rail are already in place and need to be taken out and then put back on. Just like the backplate, make sure not to tighten one screw down first, all the way down. It's important to do a crossing pattern, not to have the rail end up being bowed in one direction. After the X-rail has been attached, we're going to attach the screen. The screws to attach the screen should have been taped on to it already, and just remove that masking tape and attach the screen to the back. Now, the cable could have been twisted around in one direction, so you may, as shown here, need to twist the screen around in order to have the most amount of slack on the cable. You want it to be as loose as possible as to not get tangled up and trip over itself. Go ahead and put the cable into the slot for the grommet, as shown here, just so it's secured and out of the way while prints are running. As you can see here, we're just adjusting the screen again and rotating it again so there's maximum slack on the cable harness. On the back there are two square nuts already glued in, and all that's needed is to have the screen attached to them, like so. The next step is to take off the protective masking tape off of the motors and limit switches. We put masking tape on the motors to prevent styrofoam from getting in the contact points during shipping, and on the limit switches to protect them. The limit switches are quite fragile, so please be careful when taking off the masking tape in this step. It's important to only remove the protective masking tape that will either be a bright blue or green color. Do not remove the black duct tape on the motor. That tape is covering motor setting switches, of which there are 8 of, and they are on certain settings. If the settings of these switches are changed, motors could go in wrong directions, at different speeds, and even potentially burn themselves out. Please ensure that these switches do not get changed. With the tape off, you can then plug in the data and power lines to all of the motors, as well as all the limit switch connections as well. Please make sure that all connections are plugged all the way in, as motors can behave strangely with partial connections. You can also zip tie down the extruder wire and the wire going to the X and Y motors to the back rail. This will ensure they are kept out of the way during prints. Next, we're going to install the covers onto the machine. There should be 5 gray PLA covers and 1 black ABS cover. For the gray PLA covers, 1 goes on each side of the X rail. There should be 4 square nuts already in the X rail, and the leftmost nut and the rightmost nut are used to secure the covers as shown here. One of the covers has a small cutout in it for the limit switch of the X rail to move through it. Please ensure that that cover is on the motor side. There should be a black Sharpie mark on the X rail as shown here. This line is to help you align the bat for assembly in order to center it on the rail. For the 2 small gray covers, one goes on the end of the Y rail as shown, and the other goes on top of the Z rail. They cover the entire limit switch and wire, so please make sure to put them inside of the covers. The last gray cover just attaches by Velcro and covers the X motor and the wires. The black cover goes over the gearbox and the Y motor. All of these covers cover sharp points on the printer, and they should be attached in order to prevent injury. Just like the X motor cover, the black cover has Velcro and attaches as well. There are also screw cutouts to ensure it going on easy. We can then install the white screw guard. One side is more narrow than the other, which is plugged into the base, while the other side is just put into the gray cover. The smooth side of the cover is face downward in order to not get caught on the Y car. We can then install the bat. There should be 2 screws included on the bat that are taped down. These screws go into the remaining 2 square nuts on the X rail. Go ahead and line the bat up with a black marker on the X rail. This ensures that it is in the center of the rail. The next step is to fill your extruder with clay, but it first needs to be disassembled. You should completely remove the tube from the extruder. To do so, all 8 screws on the top and bottom need to be taken out. The threads on these tube mount and nozzle are very fragile and can be stripped easily. It is not recommended to use a drill or a power tool to take these screws or put them back in. In order to put clay into the tube, we first need to take the piston out, so the nozzle must come out as well. With the nozzle out, we can remove the piston and then get it ready to fill with clay. Try not to store your empty tube in a vertical position, as it can tip over easily and be damaged. With the extruder disassembled, now is a good time to grease the main Acme screw with the included grease. Once put on the Acme screw, you should give it a good rubbing to ensure that it stays on the screw. This grease is known as white lithium grease, which should be available at your local hardware stores. You should also add just a little bit extra to the anti-rotator, as the black anti-rotator nut will be sliding up and down the anti-rotator vertically. It should not be spinning in place, and should instead be moving vertically up and down. In the parts box, there should be an anti-rotator tool. When attached to a drill, this can assist you in moving the main Acme screw up and down. If you do not have a drill, you can do this manually by hand. You can then reassemble your extruder with your full tube of clay. You can push the Acme screw down with the anti-rotator to slightly prime the clay piston. It does not prime it fully, and we should let the motor handle that with a prime program. You can then slide on the anti-rotator, which stops the Acme screw from spinning in place. This is very important to install, as if you start a print without the anti-rotator bar on, the Acme screw will just spin endlessly, not moving. We also have to put screws into the gearbox to make sure the anti-rotator doesn't rotate. These screws should be in the gearbox in the same manner that the screws to secure the backplate were already in the base. These screws can also just be hand tightened and do not need to be tightened down all the way. The power supply plugs in to the back of the machine, as shown here. It is important to not plug in any motors while the machine is powered on. Ensure that the machine is in a powered off state when plugging in any motors. This includes the extruder. We can then load the full extruder onto its arm and ensure that we latch it down with its retentioning arm. You can then plug in the extruder wire and push the Velcro up to ensure that the extruder wire does not fall down. The machine is now ready to be powered on. You should first start by homing all the axes to make sure that the printer works. If all rails don't home, please double check all of the connections on the motors to ensure that they are all snugly in. The machine also needs a large operating space. Please make sure that there are no debris on your floor or table or any other objects that may get in the way. Please do not use the manual move commands. These commands do not take limit switches into regards and will move in any direction that it's told to move, even if the printer runs into itself. In order to start a print, the extruder first needs to be primed. Run the prime program until clay starts coming out of the end. You can then restart the printer to start your first print. Do not be concerned. Sometimes the prime program may take up to 1 or 2 minutes for clay to actually come out. Once clay has come out and the machine restarted, you can then start your first print. Once a print is started, all axes will home, and then the extruder arm will start moving downward. Make sure that the extruder is not placed too low in the bracket, as it is possible that the end nozzle will crash into the bed. If it's too high or too low, please adjust the extruder height in the bracket as needed. The setting at which the extruder arm moves downward can be edited in the config file, which will be covered in another video. When a print starts, you can pause it in the middle of a print. So to print our test pot, we'll start the program and then pause the program once it starts its actual print of moving around on the bat. You can set the extruder height by using a shim or just eyeballing it carefully. It should be 1 or 2 millimeters above the bat for its print. Sometimes the clay needs to be rubbed in a little bit in order to get a good surface to print on. You can also add a little bit of water to the surface you're printing on. As shown here, we have a small piece of wood which the pot will be printing on top of. You don't need to print on top of wood. We just chose this little small piece so we can remove the pot after it's done printing. With the correct height and surface, a pot should be able to be printed with ease. In order to get the right settings for a print, you can adjust the overall move and extrusion rate, or just the extrusion rate only. Changing the move setting will make the plate move faster and clay come out faster with the same setting. The extrusion rate setting only affects the rate at which clay will come out. When a print is complete, there is still a lot of pressure in the extruder tube, and some clay will most likely drip out of the end. After a print is finished, and printing is done for the day, you should run the retract program, which will take pressure off of the extruder tube on the inside. Leaving the tube under pressure for a long period of time may cause cracks to form in the extruder tube. The retract program only needs to be run for a few seconds to ensure that the tube is no longer under pressure. We hope this tutorial was helpful in assembling your 3D clay printer. Please check our website at 3dpotter.com for new updates and designs.